not yet.
We are the Radical Rascals. Okay, I just want to just come off right off and say, man, we apologize. So we're gonna just do a 20-minute intro apology letter that we wrote for missing the last episode. So Nick, if you'd like to begin.
I'd like to start out by saying, nah, dude, I don't want to do this. This is just too corny. And, like, everything that you suggest, I go through with them, but I can't.
Oh,
so yeah, we missed last week because I let a bird out. I live with my girlfriend, and she has two birds, and I let one of them out, and things were not good. He flew far as hell, but I caught him and I brought him back, which is a miracle. That shit, if you've ever lost a bird before, you should know you don't get them back. The fact that I got him back was wild. Like, so yeah, I got him back, but she just was not feeling good. So I was like, yeah, fuck this. I got to go home because she loves those birds. So yeah, that's what happened, and I'm not apologizing.
So what are we gonna talk about today, Nick?
Oh yeah, so this is welcome to the Radical Rascals. I'm Nick.
I'm Sean.
And we are the Radical Rascals. Fuck, dude, they get cornier and cornier as we go on, like every time. Well, before anything, we have to get into this week's sponsor.
Nike.
Yo. Imagine getting reached out to by Nike. Hey, so we were listening to your podcast and we were like, you know what? These guys might be onto something. So we figured, fuck it, we'll see if they can
invest
sponsor
millions of dollars into their podcast.
Shit, would we take it if it was millions of dollars?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, dude, like, because we could use that money.
Oh yeah, I would. I'll fucking get Nike tatted on my forehead, baby. I don't give a fuck.
All right, chill. I'm not doing all that. Not for millions of dollars. They can suck my nuts at that point. Millions of dollars. I'm not getting Nike swoosh on my forehead. Shit.
All right, so today we're gonna talk about books after Mojo recommended us to talk about books. So shout out to Mojo for the recommendation.
I'd like to actually shout out books.
Oh, right.
I'd like to a quick shout out to books everywhere. Hey, yo, we love you. Y'all mad cool. Keep fighting the good fight, books. But yeah, so this week we just wanted to talk about books and I guess like the power, the impact, and some of our favorite books. I mean, my reading list is way shorter than Sean's, but I mean, I still think I'm entitled to have a favorite book. The Giving Tree was definitely... Yo, you can laugh all you want. That book was good. That was a good book. But we'll get into that when we start talking about novels.
Yes. So
yeah, I just want to start out by talking about I guess the power of books and like the importance of reading. Because it's something that was kind of explained whenever we were younger, but I never really gave a shit because I was like, I don't want to, so it's not that important. But looking back, that's probably the one thing that I would have, one of two things that I would have done differently is I would have read a lot more. I also would have followed through with a lot more shit that I had tried because there were a lot of hobbies I picked up, but that's for a different episode. But yeah, so yeah, books are incredibly important. I had someone tell me once that like you are what you read, and it's very important to read because whatever you read he told me in a 4-year period of time that like by the end of the 4 years that like you will be whatever you had read, and all right, what are you listening to? Is that bird chirping?
No.
Oh, that's from outside? Those are actual birds chirping?
Birds.
Oh, shit.
Fuck, like I just put on bird noise
to
compliment your...
Yeah, I was like, bro, what the fuck? Damn, them birds need to shut up or I'll let them out. Anyway, so yeah, reading is very important. I think one of the issues is that, at least from what I remember, we were kind of like forced to read shit, and a lot of times it wasn't very entertaining, or like, I don't know. I just think whenever you force people to do things they don't want to do, it makes them kind of not like it, which really sucks in the long run. But okay, that one. Like, there's actual crickets outside at like 4 o'clock. Crickets don't exist. So yeah, but yeah, like for instance, I loved like Greek mythology, so anytime we had to read that shit, I stayed on top of all of that. Like, so much so that like a lot of those stories are deeply ingrained. Like, I still remember them randomly, but I don't remember what class I read them in, or like what reason, any of that. But yeah, I mean, as for like the power of books, I mean, it's just, I think it's I'm trying to find a way to word it. I think good evidence to show the power of books would be like the fact that religion and governments everywhere use them so much. I mean, anytime there's like a fascist regime, one of the first things they do is book burning, because books are a great way of spreading ideas, and they really do stand the test of time. I mean, we still have books nowadays that are 1,000 years old. It's like, these books are so important. I mean, even taking something like the Bible, Torah, or Quran, like holy books that have spread these ideas, like it's almost like a portal to the minds, or showing the minds of the people from whatever time period the books were written. It's really interesting when you start breaking down like how they've been used throughout history. And yeah, so I think it's really important to read. I've been trying to read more, and it's important that people kind of get back into reading. I think people try to substitute things like YouTube and probably social media for reading, but there's no solid substitute. I mean, audiobooks are probably the closest, but even then, I gotta admit that they don't quite do it. I mean, they're good enough. Like, if you can, sure, but it's probably like vegetarian to veganism. Where it's like, hey, if that's the best you can do, fuck it, go for it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I gotta say.
I mean, I think that's a super important point that you mentioned at the end. I mean, everything you mentioned was important, but
everything you mentioned was bullshit. But right at the end, you started to tie it together real nice.
No, when you talked about substitute, because there's like sort of this social media culture going on now where they are it's like they're summarizing important concepts in books into like Instagram and Twitter threads
and TikTok
and TikTok videos. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, there's something cool about it, right? Like where you can scroll on TikTok and fucking get a brief summary of capitalist economics, right? Or some shit, which is interesting, but that's you're like you said, it's almost like replacing it, and that's something dangerous, and that's what's going on. People like, why the fuck would I read a book about a certain topic like racism or sexism when I follow somebody on Instagram who does it for me, who summarizes it.
It's like, they read the book and they put their summary up so I can read it and tell others, and it's like, at that point, it's gone through too many filters, dude.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about briefly is how we have, as a society, stopped reading, how reading is declining, and the love of reading is the love for reading rather is diminishing, and being replaced with other shit like the celebrity world, the sort of the glitz and the glam, and this chase for fame, and what celebrities are doing. It's all artificial now. So yeah, I mean, I can start off going back to when I was a kid. My dad he never grounded me or anything. We didn't have grounding in my household, but what we did have was my dad punishing me by making me read. That's how he would do it. He wouldn't like take away my games or not let me go outside. He would make me read, and he would give me a book and he'd say read it. Not obviously all in one day. Like, he's not gonna give me like a 800.
Read it. You don't get supper till you're done with this book and can write a nice 3-page essay.
He would just give me random books, like, just read this, and then I would have to talk to him about it or some shit. And it was often, like, sometimes it wasn't even like me being punished because I wasn't like a bad kid. Sometimes it was just like, what are you doing? Nothing. I'm just watching TV. Get up and go read. Man, no, I couldn't say no. What the fuck? Like, so I would go inside.
Shit, you could have fought him.
I would go inside my room and read and just read. And I didn't like it, it was a form of like punishment, but doing it and doing it and doing it almost made it normal. It normalized it in my head. And at one point I began to like it. I began to love it and I enjoyed it because I knew how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, I'm not saying are you literate or illiterate. I'm saying if you know how to read and you know how to absorb the information that you're reading, or
kind of like efficiently.
Efficiently, exactly.
Reading.
Because some people read and I do this all the time too, especially with nonfiction books that are so dense. Like, I read a whole page and it's like, yo, what the fuck did I just read?
Yeah.
So nobody can be 100%, a perfect reader, but so that's sort of my background with books and how I started reading. It was kind of pushed on me, and I didn't like it as a child. I really didn't, and I remember some of my friends would pick on me, like, can you come outside right now after I finish the book, and they'd be like, what the fuck? And I didn't want to explain it to them. I was like, just wait, I'm almost done. I wasn't gonna tell them like my dad punishes me by making me read books. Like, nah.
Brother would have talked shit.
Yeah.
But now, like, looking back, they would have been like, damn, dog, I wish.
Why didn't your dad punish me too?
Oh, shit. Not to mention, like, how many of our friends don't have dads?
Yeah, right.
Shit.
Right.
I was just forced to, like, go do manual labor. I remember I got in trouble once, and I got suspended from school. My mom made me go work with my stepdad for a week straight.
Oh my God.
Yeah, for a week straight. She's like, I gotta go out of town. You're gonna go and you're gonna go live with him and you're gonna go work with him for a whole week.
Jeez.
And that's your punishment. And that shit sucked.
Gulag punishment.
Yeah, I had a nail gun and I shot a nail, but I didn't like press it up against the wood. I held it in the air and just shot it. That shit went. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, I still don't know how to use one of those.
A nail gun?
Yeah.
You just push it onto something and press the trigger.
Yeah, it's harder than it seems, folks. Don't buy into this foolery.
Get the fuck out of here! Like, nah. You need training. Nah, just don't be stupid with it like me, and you'll be fine.
But yeah. Just to finish my point, people are not reading enough, and we got to change that. We have to push ourselves to read. We have to get in the habit of reading. If it's, something as little as 10 pages a day makes a difference. If you have a 100-page book, 10 pages a day, as opposed to nothing, you can finish that book in 10 days, which is really not a long time. And there are plenty of books that are 100 pages and under that, you can learn so much from. So I really think people, have to get in the habit of reading. It's difficult. It's not easy. I know how it is. Especially when you don't like reading and finding a book that you like. But yeah, it's something that we need to do to advance as a society, to develop as a people. We need to go sort of backwards, right, to the time when we used to read. We didn't have TVs, we didn't have phones. When we were bored, we just read, And there's something interesting about it, because when you read, and you read, you sort of train your mind to become imaginative. You know, when you read all these books, like, you can think. You have better critical thinking skills. You have better ideas. You know, just as opposed to somebody who watches TV all day like a zombie, watches shows all day, and is on social media looking at what the Kardashians are doing. You know, so.
Yo, speaking of, have you seen what's been going on?
So this sort of spectacle has been brainwashing us, you know, and we really need to get back into reading. So before we continue with our favorite books, I just want to emphasize again, try reading more, you know. Take time out of your day, read, get a book, read.
And don't be discouraged if you like find a book that you don't like. It just means you just gotta try to find a book that you do like. You know, like, just look at different genres, and if you like something, maybe you check out something by the same author. You know, and you look up like similar authors or similar styles, or, you know, like, find what you like and branch out from there.
Yeah,
it'll make it a lot easier. At least until you learn how to read, and then you can push through books that you might not like, but you know you need to read because it has a lot of really good information.
Right. So yeah, mix it up. You know, I personally think that reading nonfiction, especially in our current state of things, is very important. But I don't want to take away from the power of fiction.
Yeah, because I was going to say, there's plenty of fiction that's incredibly powerful.
Right.
I mean, just looking at 1984
specifically
that's an incredibly powerful fictional book, you know. I mean, getting closer to nonfiction by the day, but, you know, fictional nonetheless.
So yeah, and like Nick said, you know, you might pick up a book 20 pages in and you realize you don't like it, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. It happens to all of us. Not every book is right for you, but if you feel like there's a book that you need to read, you know, like, nonfiction books are not the most entertaining books. Very boring, very dense, but...
I mean, even then, that depends. Because if it's, like, subject matter that you're really interested in, you know, like, for instance, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. If you're very interested in critical race theory, then a book like that would be really intriguing to you, you know, or even... And this is kind of jumping a little bit of ahead, but War Against All Puerto Ricans, you know, that's a nonfiction book,
right?
But it is so fascinating. Like, even if you don't give a fuck about Puerto Rico, like, that book is just so well written. You know, I actually found negative reviews about it.
Yeah, there are.
I was like, wait, but
Puerto Ricans who support, like, the colonization of their own land. Like,
dude, I just saw people who were like, yeah, this stuff just seemed kind of like fake, and I was like,
what the fuck?
He literally poured through like thousands of public records, like, went and interviewed people. Like, it took him years to do this shit. People were like, nah, kind of whack, to be real. I want to go read Rush Limbaugh's Legacy. Written by Donald Trump, with a foreword by Tucker Carlson. God, that's the most Republican book I've ever heard of.
Disgusting.
Anyway, I think that's a good transition into the next part, because honestly, that's probably one of the best books that I've ever read, and Sean put me onto it. Was War Against All Puerto Ricans. Like, when I finished reading it, like, I was angry. I just remember I was just so mad. And I was just mad because I was like, dude, like, because I'm half Puerto Rican, so it's like, I give a shit about it, but then it can just get frustrating at times being told that, like, I'm not Puerto Rican enough. You know, so then, like, I'm told, like, I'm not allowed to give a fuck. But then I hear this story, or like this combination of stories, because honestly, the worst part of the book, like, that I realized, was that this story wasn't even unique. Like, this is literally copied and pasted from Africa, South America, from the Middle East to, you know, Asia with the Philippines or like Guam, and, you know, it's just like all these places that this shit just happens to. Like, this fucking colonialization is just disgusting. We literally go into places, you know, create problems and sell them the solutions, you know, and then when they don't have money, we loan them money so that they could buy the solutions from us. It's just so fucked up. Like, oh my god. So, like, this book just explains the history of Puerto Rico from the time of the Spanish-American War, basically from the time of the U.S. Acquisition of Puerto Rico as a territory up until roughly the 1950s, which is when the Puerto Rico nationalist movement became a thing. Like, Puerto Rico wanted its independence, or at least a good chunk of Puerto Rico wanted its independence from America. And this book covers all of the events, and it's just so well researched, documented, and written. Like, it's because it's like it goes over all these different aspects. It's not just one linear story. It talks about a whole bunch of different things that were important to the story, and then was slowly tying them all together. You know, it felt like someone was sitting you down and explaining everything in this like broad, complicated timeline, and it just it was so I couldn't put the book down. Like, I needed to read the next page. I needed to know what happened next, and even like living in a world where like I see that Puerto Rico didn't gain its independence, like, and I'm reading this amazing story. I'm like, how the fuck did this not work? It's just, if I urge anybody out there, Puerto Rican or not, like, I just urge anyone out there who's interested in understanding how big of a problem the colonization of countries by America, or even by any superpower, really, is. Like, if you're ever interested in learning that, or you're ever curious about learning that, just read this one book and know that literally the story is copied and pasted all over the globe, and it's fucking disgusting, dude.
The main guy, the leader of the sort of
Pedro Albizu Campos.
Yeah, Campos was just a legend. Che Guevara, when he made his speech at the UN, he actually like shouted him out.
He was the first Puerto Rican to graduate Harvard, right?
Yeah, Harvard Law School.
And he learned like 5 languages.
He was a polyglot, yeah.
Dude, he wrote letters to the UN. He wrote speeches, and dude.
And at Harvard he was valedictorian.
Yeah.
But they didn't let him make his valedictorian speech.
Yeah.
They didn't let him do it. Why? Because he's Puerto Rican. You know why? And it was the norm.
Why would they let a savage go up there and speak in front of these well-educated? And this dude was so smart.
And they when he came back to Puerto Rico and, you know, started the whole movement, the independence movement, he eventually was captured, put in jail, and they just committed crimes against him, like with radiation and sick things they did to him while he was in that cell. There were pictures of him with his legs just swollen up and his face swollen.
He was in a cell, like, underneath the prison, but he had sunburns.
Exactly.
Because they were testing this radiation on the prisoners there. And they would deny it, but it's like, how the fuck can a man get sunburns in a cement cell under a prison? Like, he has all of the symptoms of radiation sickness as we know them. It's like, nah, you guys are crazy. It's just a conspiracy. It's like, that's the conspiracy? Dude.
Yeah. Long live Campos, Don Pedro. Yeah. I guess I'll go on with a book then. I mean, I think what I'll start off with is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Who was a Guyanese revolutionary scholar. That's a fascinating title, I think. Like, he was a scholar. He was a PhD. He was very well educated, But he was a revolutionary. He was out on the streets. He was organizing. He was doing everything. So the title revolutionary scholar fits him, rather well. But the book itself, to put it briefly, is literally as the title explains. It's how Europe underdeveloped Africa, and underdeveloped here is used as an adjective, in the sense that the way we think about Africa today is usually like it's just poor country, a poor continent with a bunch of poor countries, and the people are poor, they're backwards, this and that, and what Walter Rodney does is provide insight and a detailed history of how Europe is responsible for that underdevelopment, right? Because countries, like how we describe countries today, are like they're developed countries, like the U.S. The U.S. is a developed country, and then like
developing,
and then there are poor countries, right? They're developing, like they're not fully developed, but they're developing. But Walter Rodney makes the argument that there's actually a third category of countries that are called underdeveloped countries. They were developed or developing, but they were underdeveloped by an outside imperial colonizing force. And the book is just phenomenal. I mean, just total detailed history of the things Europe did via imperialism and colonization in Africa. And I think that is a necessary reading for students of African studies, but just for people in general. I mean, it's important to know. And I think that book should be recommended reading in all classrooms in the United States. Although it is a bit complicated, it's very important for world history and even economics. So yeah, that's a book that really impacted me, and I think everybody should read that. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney.
I think you talking about him being a revolutionary scholar is really interesting to me, because it reminds me of the dude you literally just told me about, Comandante Marcos.
Oh,
Subcomandante.
Yeah.
And like how he was literally a revolutionary scholar, And Pedro Albizu Campos, I think he can be
also
a revolutionary scholar. I mean, he did take up arms in the end. Motherfucker had to shoot back, but
that's a good point. Most of these people are Lenin. Mm-hmm. Lenin. I mean, he didn't have a PhD, but he has phenomenal theoretical writings that are, still being talked about. So.
I mean, Ho Chi Minh. He was significantly more militant. I wouldn't consider him as much of a scholar, but he traveled abroad and he had studied quite a bit. I mean, like he did do a lot of legwork and he did write a lot of stuff. It's just a lot of it doesn't get translated from Vietnamese. But I think it's because a lot of revolutionary people. I think it's kind of like a prerequisite that you have to be scholarly. You have to read up on shit, and you have to be a thinker. You can't just be, a dude with a gun. It's just not gonna work. Yeah. I mean, like even Che Guevara, like he wasn't just some dude with a gun. He also like wrote and read shit. He
was a doctor. He was literally a doctor. But he was a scholar as well. He was a theoretical thinker. He wrote a lot.
Yeah, and that's my point. Is like, it takes a lot of thinking, a lot of critical analysis of your situation, the situation of others, and the situation of the world itself, and coming to some conclusion that you feel can be met, and more importantly needs to be met, is really what pushes people to be revolutionary. I don't think. People seek out to be revolutionaries. I think they just, through that scholarly itch within them, they kind of come to that conclusion where they're like, holy shit, we need something to be drastically different, So I think that's just, I just wanted to remark about how interesting it was to say that he was a revolutionary scholar, because it feels, and I mean this in a positive way, it feels a little redundant to say, but I do get what you mean. I mean, shit, I would love to do an episode talking about just like important revolutionaries and like their impacts. Actually, maybe we'll do that next week. Like what they did and how they have benefited the world and why we don't learn about them. Why don't we learn about Campos? Why don't we learn about fucking Marcos? Why don't we learn about Sankara? Why don't we learn about all of these fucking amazing people that have done crazy things for the world? For the benefit of themselves and their people. It's just crazy. But yeah, I mean, speaking of the next book I wanted to bring up, which I think is a classic and definitely an incredibly important book that I feel needs to be read by, if not black people, definitely Americans, is the autobiography of Malcolm X. That book was just so fucking good. That was another one that I felt I couldn't put down until I finished. I mean, that one is, it's long. There's no way around it. It's like 430 pages, something like that. It's a long book, but it's just so good. It's just so unapologetically real. He doesn't pull punches. He doesn't paint himself in a nice light. It feels like you're really just reading about his life. He talks about the way he fucked up whenever he was younger, and it can really make you appreciate the entire story of his life, and how he came to be who he was by the end of his life, because the book really does come up to, I think he was killed before the book was even published, right? If I'm not mistaken, like he had finished the book, him and Alex Haley had finished the book, but it got published, like it was set to get published right after he had died. And it's just wild, because the story really takes you through what life was like for black men, or I guess black people in general, but specifically because he's a black man in America in the early 1900s all the way up through the 1960s. And it's just so fascinating, in his young life, you see, and he remarks about how, looking back, like reflecting on his young life, he understands the fallacy in his thinking, where he was just trying to make a quick buck. He was selling drugs, and he was like pimping girls out and shit, and he was like breaking into houses, getting arrested, and like he remarks about how foolish all that was, and how like indoctrinated he was into thinking that was how his life was supposed to be, and how I don't know why it sticks with me so much, but he goes into depth explaining the process of conking your hair.
In the bathroom and
and how like how like black people would go through this process of like fucking up their hair basically, and just to get it straight and to look like white people's hair, and like that process, I don't know, it stuck with me, because it felt like, even though it was very literal, it was a literal metaphor of how indoctrinated people can be by their oppressors, because they are the metric by which everything is measured, and I think that just kind of like, I don't know, that kind of was just like wild. That's the part that always sticks with me, that, and like at the end, whenever he goes to Mecca and he sees everyone of all different colors, and then he realizes, oh hey, I was kind of like feeding into another form of racism, and it should really be about everyone being able to accept each other regardless of color, and all of us coming together in unity. But yeah, anyway, that book is amazing, and it really should be read by everyone. Like I said, not even just black people, but just Americans in general, and maybe even abroad, if people are interested in understanding like a first-hand account of life in the early to mid 1900s of a black man. It's really good.
I think even more importantly, white people should probably read that. Something that they should, and it's very digestible. It's like, again, it's an autobiography. I mean, it's a guy talking about his life.
Yeah, it really feels like he sits you down and talks about it. And that's why I was saying, it's really long. Like there's no way around that. It's a long book, but it's not a bunch of filler and bullshit. Like he's telling you his entire fucking life. Like even from the very beginning when he's talking about his dad, like having been presumably killed by a mob of white racist people. It's just wild.
It's a very, very powerful book. Everybody should read that. My next book is Midnight on the Moon, which is the 8th book of the Magic Treehouse series. I know. I literally had to look it up, bro.
That's what you're looking up. Yo. So my next book is Super Fudge in the Fudge series by Judy Blume.
Oh my god.
Fucking
shout out Judy.
Tales of a 4th grade nothing.
It's so complicated. I mean, I would recommend, and I just finished reading this book literally last night, but I've been putting it off for a while. It's ties in with Nick's Malcolm X recommendation, especially towards the end, about Mecca and Malcolm X being a Muslim and his lens, his worldview really being Islam.
Oh, he was a Muslim? Oh shit! Never mind. No.
Scratch that. I would recommend everybody read Muhammad by Karen Armstrong, or even No God But God by Reza Aslan, which is just about Islam. But more importantly, I would recommend everybody to read Muhammad, A Prophet of Our Time by Karen Armstrong. It's very short, sort of biography of Muhammad and the history of that time and the growth of Islam. Very powerful, and it would clear up a lot of misconceptions that people have about the religion of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, that people just get wrong, I mean, growing up in the West, you hear all types of shit about him, just totally fabricated stories that are not true. They're just rooted in, Islamophobia. They're just rooted in anti-Arab racism and whatnot. So I think everybody should read that, learn about he's literally one of the most important historical figures of all time, right next to Jesus.
Wait, was Reza Aslan the guy who the scholar who talks about Jesus, the Muslim scholar? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wrote a book on Jesus and he wrote a book on Islam. No God But God. Very, very good book. And they write
he's
well.
a Muslim. He talked about Jesus.
Yeah.
That's bad funny. Can we talk about that just for a split second to divert?
Yeah.
This dude Reza Aslan is a scholar. He has a PhD in theology and specifically had studied Jesus's life and teachings for like 20 plus years as a scholar. He went on to, was it Fox News?
Fox.
He was on Fox News, and the lady's like, right, so you are a practicing Muslim, yet you wrote a book on Jesus. I don't understand that. And he's like, well, right, but you have to understand, I have a PhD on essentially the life of Jesus, which I've been obsessed with and studying for 20 years. She's like, but you're a Muslim, so how can that be? What was the example that she gave?
She's like, that's like a Democrat writing a biography on Ronald Reagan. And he's like, no, it's like a Democrat with a PhD in the history of the life of Ronald Reagan writing a book on Ronald Reagan.
Dude, it was so ignorant. It was so funny, though. All right, fuck the reading. Everyone needs to watch that interview. That interview is so funny. It's just so funny.
It's ignorant because
because the guy's even looking at her like, you really believe this?
Yeah. I mean, it's stupid because Jesus is a very important prophet in Islam.
Yeah.
And Muslims, when they say Jesus' name, they say peace be upon him, just like they do with the Prophet Muhammad. You know,
he's even like a huge part in spirituality within alchemy. He's viewed as being like a great mystic and sorcerer. Like, dude, he's literally regarded in such high regards by almost everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
In Islam, he's considered the only human being with a pure soul.
Yeah.
He's the only pure being ever, not even the Prophet
He's
Muhammad.
considered a master prophet, right? That's how I had heard it.
Yeah, by birth.
All
by
right.
birth.
Anyway, I needed to talk about that because that was just mad funny to me. But anyway, so no God but God. Is that where you had left off?
Yeah, that was one of the books, but more importantly, I think a better book would be Muhammad.
Oh.
It's literally called Muhammad and a Prophet of Our Time by Karen Armstrong. She is actually a Catholic, but she's also a scholar of religions, and she...
Hold on, but Catholics can...
she wrote literally a book about Muhammad, and it's fascinating. Everybody should read it. You'll find out things that, Muhammad did. I mean, what kind of person he was. I mean, just a phenomenal human being. A great leader, and somebody who the author mentions in the book. Islam, one of the major misconceptions of Islam and Muhammad is that it is inherently anti-woman, and that women are oppressed and mistreated, and especially now with the hijabs and the burqas and niqabs covering women's faces and shit, and that polygamy, that men can marry as many
genital
women.
mutilation.
Yeah, genital mutilation.
One that I hear about.
Yeah, which is absolutely nowhere in the Quran, but people like to make that association.
Right. Not even to mention the association with terrorism and explosions. No, the Quran teaches them that they'll get 72 virgins if they blow themselves up or crash a plane into towers.
Yeah. Which is nowhere, of course, in the Quran at all. It's just some incredible things you hear. I mean, the author makes the claim that, like, Muhammad, with Islam, liberated the women of the Arabian Peninsula and gave them rights. And mind you, this is the 7th century. Muhammad gave women rights, where
1,000 years before anyone even considered giving them rights, let alone actually let them get rights.
That women in the Western world until the 19th century didn't have these rights, and Islam through the Prophet Muhammad gave these rights to women, property rights. And whatnot, and the whole polygamy thing was for women, because a lot of men were dying in these wars, and the demographic population was just, not equal, and there were a lot more women than men, and women were very lonely, and because they were lonely, they didn't have any chance to inherit anything or to be able to produce offspring or anything, and so that is exactly why in Islam, you can have more than one wife, but it states it very clearly that you must treat your wives equally and fairly. So it's not like anybody can go out and have as many wives as they want. Right. It's only people who can treat their wives fairly, equally, and love them all equally. If you can't do that, then you're not allowed to. Yeah. It's a very short read. It's literally 200 pages, I think, 202 pages. Everybody should just order that. It's such a fascinating read. Very important because, we hear about the Bible, we hear about Jesus, we hear about, all these Western ideas and figures, but Jesus isn't obviously Western at all, but Christianity has become Westernized. But we fail to think about the world's fastest growing religion, which is soon gonna take over the entire world.
Buddhism, dude.
This dude said Buddhism. Mojo, I know Mojo like that line that Vinny Paz says, "Over 1 billion Muslims, you could never stop Islam." But
oh yeah. You want to try again?
This guy single-handedly stops Islam.
No.
And that's another thing, real quick, because I'm just stuck on this. But Islam is all about fighting oppression and injustice and inequality. So that's the essence of Islam. Wherever you see oppression, you must combat it. Wherever you see injustice, you must combat it. Wherever you see inequality, you must combat it. And yeah, it's something that is essential to the message of Islam. There are other concepts within Islam like zakat, which is one of the 5 pillars of faith, which is just giving money to the people in need. But there are other concepts in Islam, like we don't have interest in Islam. There's no interest. So if you want to take out a loan, there's no interest on the loan, because interest is inherently leads to debt, right? And in Islam, debt is forbidden. Sorry, because it leads to enslavement, right? So there's no debt. If you go anywhere in the Muslim world, you want to take out a loan for school or something, for a house, there's no debt. If you take out $30,000, you will pay $30,000 back.
Yeah.
And just other concepts that are inherently against fighting against oppression and injustice. So I think that's something that is totally misconstrued in the West, and by especially ignorant Americans who know nothing about Islam.
I mean, it's funny whenever you explain it like that, because you explain Islam as being inherently anti-oppressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very anti... Yeah, well, we'll just stick with anti-oppressive, but America tends to be very anti-Islam. Yeah. So that would make it, or at least American thinking very much is anti-Islam. It's Islamophobic, and in that means that they're anti-oppression. So when you start to reduce the fraction, you start realizing that the only reason that a country would start spreading anti-oppressive propaganda is because they're oppressive and they can't admit it. It's like it's just funny to me, because while you're talking about that, I'm just thinking about literally everything I've ever thought about Islam. I dead ass, before learning about anything about it, all I knew is they pray 5 times a day. Their God's name is Allah. And if they kill people and they kill themselves in the process, then they will die, go to heaven, and get 72 virgins. That is the extent of my knowledge of Islam. That is literally all that I had known. I mean, I've learned, like, in my adult life, up before this podcast, but for the longest time, that's really all I knew. And I was like, well, why the fuck would
anybody be
people? Yeah, and I was like, why would people want this religion? This sucks. This is why Christianity's better. Then the more I learn about Christianity and Islam, the more I'm like, oh, well, religion itself just can be really cool or can be kind of a piece of shit. It really comes down to the humans more than it does the religion. I mean, like, even with forms of government, I've told you for the longest time that like any form of government can work if people just were less shitty. Like, you can even have a fucking benevolent dictator. But yeah.
I wanted to say what you just mentioned about religion. A lot of scholars, Muslim scholars and imams, argue that Islam is not even a religion, but rather a methodology.
Right.
And it has less to do with belief systems. Yeah, you have to believe in God, but
it's more like how to go about
exactly,
your life.
you can believe in God and be a shit person,
Right.
which is, we see that often. But with Islam, there are clear directions on what to do, what not to do, which is why people say that Islam is not a religion, but rather a methodology. It's
very
methodology.
similar to like Buddhism. Buddhism is
Right.
less of a religion,
Right.
and way more about spirituality
Exactly.
and just how to carry yourself.
Exactly. There are things forbidden that you don't do.
Yeah.
There are things that you must do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's very methodological in that sense, which is why it attracts people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about I believe in this, and I believe this is what's going to happen, and I believe in... No, it's about doing and abstaining from doing certain things. So I think that's something very attractive, which is why a lot of Muslims are also socialists, right? And there's that is growing. This idea of Islamic socialism is growing because the two are very compatible.
I think the idea of socialism in general is growing just because
Right.
people are thinking more.
Right.
And I find it kind of funny that like the more you think, the more of a chance there is that you'll end up like on the left. Then the more of a chance you'll end up being like, oh hey, that's all kind of dog shit. Like I find it so weird that people can be like anti-progressive. It's like progressive is literally like to progress,
Yeah,
like to move forward.
Yeah.
Like why and I love how the argument that gets made is no, conservatives need to be here to keep progressives from going too far, and I'm like, what the fuck is too far? Like they make it sound like progress can be bad. And I understand that the concept is that it's like, oh well, we don't know what's good or bad until it's too late. And it's like, well, we just don't want someone to gain too much power and do some wild shit. But I don't know. I just want to... It's so dumb. But yeah, no, I do agree. Like, that's definitely why people are generally moving a lot more towards the left. I mean, even liberals, unfortunately, are coming over.
What about another book from you, Nick?
Well, since we're on the topic of spirituality, I gotta say the Kabbalion. Wait, do I? Maybe the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. No, the Kabbalion. So in
That's a Pokemon?
yeah, that's the one. Number 263.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. No, the Kabbalion is a book written by the three initiates. Basically written by an unknown author. People pretty much assume who the author is. Some dude from the early 1900s who had a hand in like the was it the New Age movement or like the New Thinking movement? I can't remember off the top of my head, but either way, this book is the belief system of alchemy in a nutshell. It's a really short read. You can find a copy of it on like leatherbound for like, it was like $12 on Amazon, which is surprising. But yeah, I like it a lot because it holds a lot of the core values and beliefs of and even the methodology of alchemy. It's literally like the introduction to alchemy. Like, it doesn't go over any sort of rituals or anything. It doesn't go over anything that's like super complicated. Just like the core tenets of alchemy. And I found it to be really, really eye-opening, and really start to like change how I look at life, people, consciousness, and the universe, and how all of those things are significantly interconnected. And it's just, I mean, that's more of a personal preference. I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't know why I'm having trouble like explaining it. I think it's because like there's just so much like different stuff in it that people aren't really used to, that I don't know where to begin with explaining it. But
well, what's something you took from it? One thing, whether it be something it's more significant.
Correspondence. There are different tenets within it. I believe there's 8, and one of them is or different laws within it, and one of them is like is correspondence. As below, so above. So the concept being like that. Well, as below, so above, and as above, so below. So what happens here on Earth affects what happens up in the stars, right? What happens out in the cosmos, and vice versa. And that's why things like astrology exist, is because what happens out there has an effect here. If you imagine the whole universe being like one large clock, all these gears are turning. Yeah, they're turning in separate places, but all of them, a single turn from one gear will affect other gears. I mean, it's just as simple as that. The concept definitely goes a lot further than that and a lot more complex, with concepts of, I mean, the way I translate it is as within, so without as well, like, because the universe itself is a mental projection of the all being the alchemical name for God, essentially. But yeah, like, so all of this is just like living consciousness, and then since we have living consciousness within ourselves, then it's like the universe is a mental projection, but then everything that we experience is a mental projection within ourselves as well. So it's like it starts to tie into like what you think you can manifest into the world, just as the world can affect how you think, so it can go both ways. I mean, it's not like you'll shoot fire out of your hands, because that's like some ridiculous examples people like to give, but it goes into like the law of attraction, right? You think positive and positive things will happen. You can start to draw in certain things by manifesting them, and that's where things like rituals and meditation come into play. Is the more you focus on this one concept, the more likely it is that things will start to steer in that direction. It's not that $1 million will fall right in front of you if you sit there thinking about a briefcase, but maybe you'll bring more prosperous events or opportunities your way. It's more like you're calling out to the universe, and the universe is responding. I mean, this is all like the best I can explain it, being like an incredible beginner, to all of these concepts. But yeah, so yeah, this book is definitely a great first step. If you are interested in any of these concepts, you could also watch the show Midnight Gospel. This dude Duncan Trussell, he has a podcast, and he always invites on very like spiritual people from all different types of spiritualities, and the show is basically him taking these podcasts and turning them into like animated episodes. But yeah, I mean, you could also just like go and watch his podcast. He has one with Damien Eccles, which is one of the West Memphis Three. I guess they were 3 teenagers who got arrested for murder, and like he was on death row for like 20 years or some shit. And through there, he found his spirituality. He found high magic and alchemy, and he's written a bunch of books. You can also look up High Magic by Damien Eccles. I haven't read that one yet, but I've heard that it's fantastic. I would definitely recommend Kabbalion first, and if that does intrigue you, that's probably a good next step. Also, listening to pretty much anything by Terence McKenna. Terence McKenna is very, very big on that. He does a whole bunch of stuff on alchemy. But yeah, that's and The Giving Tree. Read The Giving Tree. It's a good book. Classic novel.
I think I could give one more book real quick. The Shock Doctrine. Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. She's a journalist that wrote about what this idea of electroshock therapy, but on the economic scale. So essentially what she provides different examples, such as 9/11, the tsunami in 2004 in Southeast Asia, the hurricane in New Orleans, and she finds a common theme among all of them, and it's this idea of disaster capitalism. And it really speaks for itself. It's this idea where you have a natural disaster, which really it's arguable whether it's natural or not, but you have something like Katrina, right, where this hurricane wipes out cities and destroys, a lot of infrastructure and whatnot. And right afterwards, you now have a bunch of capitalists seizing opportunities to build shit, and make profit. And this is what they did in New Orleans with charter schools, these private schools. So a large percentage of New Orleans schools are actually private schools, and a lot of people can't afford them. And the same goes with in 2004 in Asia, in Southeast Asia, with the tsunami, where the whole coastline was just totally ravaged. And what do you have afterwards? These big companies building hotels and investing in all this sort of touristic shit, and they made bank off of that. So that's why it's called disaster capitalism. You have something like 9/11, which wasn't a natural disaster, but what happens afterwards? You have a war right afterwards, and capitalists thrive off that. How did capitalists thrive off of 9/11? Well, immediately after 9/11, we engaged in a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the company Halliburton and other companies, weapon manufacturing companies, made bank off of that, because every gun, every bullet, every helmet, every shoe, everything that deals with the military, from toilet seats to bombs and planes, these companies make money off of. And so that's exactly what disaster capitalism is. And it happens all the time. You have it in Puerto Rico too with the hurricane,
Mm-hmm. Hell, you even have it right now with COVID.
We have it right now exactly with COVID. people are taking advantage and making bank off of it, in different industries.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very digestible read, and a lot of history there, but it's so fascinating, and I recommend everybody to check it out. The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. I mean, I think that's what I gave, like 3 books. You gave 3 books.
Yeah, 4 if you count The Giving Tree, but
yeah, and 4 for me if you count Midnight on the
Moon. Dude, you know what's crazy? I never read the Magic Schoolhouse book, or Magic Treehouse books.
For real?
Yeah. You ever read Dumb Bunny?
Nah.
I used to love those Dumb Bunny books. I don't know why. I think they were so dumb. No, I used to love those ones where it's like, if you give a mouse a cookie.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Dude, I loved those ones so much.
Actually,
I had the whole set.
I outgrew that in 1st grade when I started reading Das Kapital.
You have literally never read Das Kapital. I have heard no good things about it. I've heard that it is just so long and boring as fuck.
Oh, God. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for today. I'm not even going to say what we're going to do next week, because it's been like 4 times when we said we were going to talk about something, but we talk about something different. So
yeah, because the nature and nurture thing had to get pushed off because something came up with Ariana and she's busy. So whenever she's free, we'll get her back on here for that. I would like to do the revolutionary one though, where we pick different like role models of like revolutionaryism, or just revolutionaries. I guess that's a word too.
Sure.
And we can talk about them, and we can go into each one. We can have a list of them and just kind of like go into what they did and what they brought to the world, really, and how they should be remembered. And maybe even like pick some that have been misremembered, and correct things, like Rush Limbaugh. I think he needs to be remembered correctly for all the great things he's done. I think the left is trying too hard to smear his name.
Oh yeah, for
sure. Good name. But yeah, so that is.
See us next week, either nature versus nurture or revolutionary
if
figures.
She's free, then that, or revolutionary thinkers, or maybe we'll do the imperialism and colonialism.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really good one too, because we can go into a lot there.
Yeah.
Like we only touched on it here, but it goes so far.
All right, so bye.
Thank you for sticking around. Be sure to like and comment below. Fuck, I hate that we have to say that now, but alright, peace out. Fuck you.